My dead father wasn't an architect. I just found a hidden lab underneath our house, and there are glass tanks filled with failed, preserved versions of me. Model 12. I found a hidden room in my late father's attic, and what I discovered inside proves that my entire life has been a carefully constructed lie. My father was a respected architect in a quiet suburb of Ontario, a man of routine and silence. When he passed away last month, he left me the house, but he also left me a nightmare. 2 days ago, while I was clearing out his old office, I noticed a slight misalignment in the wooden floorboards beneath his desk. After prying them open, I found a heavy, crimson-red steel box secured with a biometric lock. To my absolute horror, the scanner accepted my thumbprint instantly, even though I had never seen this box in my life. Inside were 12 passports, all featuring my face, but each with a different name, a different nationality, and a different birth date spanning over 40 years. I am only 28. Among the passports was a stack of Polaroids showing me at various stages of life: infancy, childhood, my teenage years, but the dates on the back of the photos started in 1974. This is physically impossible. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I felt a cold sweat wash over me as I realized the boy in the 1970s photos was wearing the exact same scar on his chin that I got from a bike accident 5 years ago. How could a child from 50 years ago have a scar I only received recently? As I delved deeper into the box, I found a handwritten ledger. The entries weren't names. They were serial numbers. My name, Mark, was highlighted in yellow next to the label. Model 12, Final Integration. The entry below it sent a chill down my spine that I still can't shake. Model 11 disposed of due to emotional instability. Memory wipe failed. Do not let Model 12 access the basement archive. Just as I read those words, the smart home system, which had been silent all day, crackled to life. A voice that sounded exactly like my father, but synthesized and cold, echoed through the house. Mark, you were told never to go into my office. Security Protocol Alpha has been initiated. Please stay where you are. The retrievers are 5 minutes away. I ran to the window and saw 3 black SUVs pulling into my driveway, blocking any exit. I'm currently locked in the attic, clutching a box that proves I might not even be human, while the men outside are starting to break down my front door. If you are reading this, I need you to understand that everything you think you know about your identity might be a script written by someone else. The sound of my front door splintering open echoed through the vents, a violent reminder that I had less than 4 minutes before they reached the attic. My mind was racing, if I was. Model 12. What happened to the others? I grabbed the red box and scanned the room for a way out. The attic window was too high, but then I remembered the ledger's warning. Do not let Model 12 access the basement archive. In movies, you run away from the danger, but in this twisted reality, the only way to find the truth was to go deeper into the house. I slipped through the laundry chute, a tight squeeze that dropped me directly into the mudroom on the first floor. I could hear heavy footsteps and muffled radio chatter from the hallway. Subject is not in the primary bedroom. Move to the upper levels, a voice commanded. I held my breath, moving like a shadow toward the basement door. It wasn't just a wooden door anymore. It had been reinforced with a steel frame I had never noticed before. I pressed my thumb to the handle, and just like the box, it clicked open with a soft, mechanical hiss. As I descended the stairs, the air turned sterile and cold, smelling of ozone and hospital disinfectant. The basement wasn't a storage space. It was a laboratory. Rows of glass canisters lined the walls, filled with a viscous, blue liquid. I approached one and nearly screamed. Floating inside was a boy who looked exactly like me at age 10, perfectly preserved, but his eyes were wide open, staring into nothingness. Above the tank was a digital display. Model 7, cardiac failure during Euromapping. My vision blurred. I wasn't a son, I was a product. I was an iteration of a long-term experiment. Suddenly, a monitor on the central desk flickered to life, showing a live feed of the men in black suits entering the attic. They were holding high-tech scanners, looking for my heat signature. He's in the sub-level. One of them barked into his comms. I scrambled to the main terminal, desperately searching for a way to delete my data or find an exit. A file titled, "The Origin Project," sat on the desktop. I clicked it, and a video started playing. It was my father, looking younger but exhausted, sitting in this very room. "If you are watching this, Mark, then the cycle has reached its tipping point," he said, his voice trembling. "You are not a clone. You are something far more dangerous to them. You are the only one who's successfully integrated the archive." Just as he said that, the basement elevator dinged. The doors began to slide open, and I realized I was trapped in a room with no exits and a secret in my head that people were willing to kill for. I grabbed a glass shard from a broken vial, ready to fight, but the person who stepped out of the elevator wasn't a soldier. It was a woman who looked exactly like the mother I was told died in a car accident 20 years ago, and she was holding a sedative dart gun pointed directly at my chest. The woman standing before me, an identical replica of my deceased mother, lowered the dart gun slightly, her eyes, disturbingly familiar, betraying no emotion. "Hello, Mark," she said, her voice a flat monotone, devoid of the warmth I remembered from childhood photos. "Or should I say Model 12? My heart hammered. "You're not my mother. My mother died in a car accident," I choked out, clutching the glass shard tighter. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched her lips. "That was the cover story, Mark. For all of them. For all of you." She gestured vaguely towards the glass canisters. "I am Project Lead Dr. Eris Thorne. And technically, I am your biological creator." The air grew thick with a silence that screamed louder than any explosion. My entire life, my memories, my grief, all of it was a program narrative. "My father, he warned me about the archive," I stammered, pointing to the glowing monitor showing his video. "He told me I wasn't a clone." Dr. Thorne's gaze sharpened, a flicker of something almost like surprise in her cold eyes. "The archive? He actually told you about that? Unforeseen variable." She raised the dart gun again, but this time, her hand trembled. "He was supposed to be decommissioned before he could interfere. He grew sentimental." The retrievers from upstairs were getting closer. I could hear their boots thudding above us. Dr. Thorne glanced nervously at the elevator's internal camera feed. "Listen, Mark, we don't have time for a full explanation. The archive isn't just data. It's a consciousness. A blueprint of something ancient and powerful, merged with your own. Your father, bless his misguided heart, believed he could use you to reactivate it without our control. That's why he died. She stepped forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He knew they would come for you once the integration was complete. He designed this whole house as a failsafe, a final test. The red box, the mother story, even his fake death, all to push you to find this basement and activate your true potential." Before I could process the words, a loud bang echoed from the top of the basement stairs. The steel door was being breached. Dr. Thorne shoved a small, metallic data chip into my hand. "This chip contains the override code for the basement's lockdown. Find the Omega terminal in Sector 7. It's the only way to sever their connection to the archive, to you. Run, Mark. Now!" She then turned, pulling a heavy-duty energy weapon from her lab coat, aiming it at the opening door. "You are not taking my son, Director Vance," she roared, her monotone voice replaced by a fierce, protective snarl. The last thing I saw before I bolted through a maintenance tunnel she revealed behind a fake wall was a flash of red light and the sound of weapon fire. My mother was fighting to protect me, but was it because I was her son, or because I was her most valuable experiment? The maintenance tunnel was narrow, smelling of stagnant water and old copper. As I scrambled through the dark, the sounds of the firefight behind me faded, replaced by a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. This wasn't just a basement. It was an underground complex that spanned miles. I looked at the metallic chip Dr. Thorne had pressed into my hand. It was pulsing with a faint blue light, synchronized perfectly with my own heartbeat. Every time my heart raced, the chip glowed brighter. It was terrifying, as if the technology knew exactly how I felt. I emerged into a massive, dimly lit hall labeled Sector 7, Neural Infrastructure. It looked like a graveyard of technology. Hundreds of discarded models, or versions of me, sat in rows of chairs, their heads connected to thick bundles of fiber optic cables. They weren't in tanks, they were just sitting there, like statues in a museum of failures. I moved past them, my breath hitching as I saw a version of me that looked exactly like I did on my graduation day, still wearing the same blue tie. The cruelty of this place was beyond comprehension. Suddenly, a holographic interface flickered to life in the center of the hall. It wasn't my father or Dr. Thorne this time. It was a digital projection of myself, but older, scarred, and wearing a military uniform. "Stop walking, Mark," the hologram said. Its voice wasn't synthesized. It was my voice, just weary from 1,000 lifetimes. "If you reach the Omega terminal, you aren't just severing their connection. You're opening a door that hasn't been opened in 10,000 years. I froze. "Who are you?" I whispered. The hologram sighed, a glitch rippling through its chest. "I am Model 1. The first attempt to host the archive. They think they created us, Mark, but they only found us. We are an ancient signal that they've been trying to tune into for decades. Every time a model fails, the signal gets stronger. You are the final integration because you are the only one whose brain didn't liquefy under the pressure of the archive's data." A red light began to sweep across the room. "The retrievers have bypassed Thorne," the hologram warned. "They aren't using sedative darts anymore. Director Vance has ordered a hard reset. That means they'll kill you and harvest your brain tissue to start over with Model 13. I heard the heavy clatter of tactical boots at the end of the hall. "Where is the terminal?" I shouted. The hologram pointed to a massive obsidian pillar at the far end of the room, surrounded by a swirling cloud of nanites. "There. But remember, Mark, once you plug the chip in, you cease to be a man and you become a god. And gods have no use for family." I didn't care about being a god. I just wanted to stop being a target. I sprinted toward the pillar as bullets began to whistle past my ears, sparking off the metal chairs. I reached the console, the chip in my hand burning hot, and as I went to slam it into the slot, a voice over the intercom stopped me cold. It was the director. "Mark, don't do it. If you activate the archive, you will kill everyone within a 50-mile radius, including your mother, who is still alive in the room behind you." I hesitated, my hand inches from the slot, looking back at the door I just came through. Was it a lie, or was I about to become the monster they always wanted me to be? My hand hovered over the terminal slot, the metal chip searing my palm like a coal. Director Vance's voice crackled through the speakers again, dripping with a false, oily concern. "Think about it, Mark. If you trigger the archive now, you're not a hero. You're a bomb. The neural pulse required to sync your brain with the system will fry every living nervous system in the vicinity. Is your freedom worth 10,000 lives?" I looked back. The tactical team had stopped firing, their red laser sights dancing across my chest like angry fireflies. They were waiting. Behind them, I could see a slumped figure being dragged into the hall. It was Dr. Thorne, her lab coat stained crimson, but she was breathing. She looked up, her eyes locking onto mine, and she shook her head slowly. "Don't do it." Or was she saying don't believe him? The Model 1 hologram appeared beside me again, his digital face twisted in a sneer. "He's lying, Mark. The pulse won't kill the innocent. It will only disable their technology. He's terrified because once you're synced, they lose their greatest weapon, you." My head was throbbing, a high-pitched whine growing louder in my ears, the archive inside me reacting to the proximity of the terminal. It felt like 1,000 voices were whispering at once, sharing secrets of stars and forgotten languages. I looked at the director, who was now visible at the far end of the hall, flanked by guards. He held a remote detonator. "I have a kill switch in your neck, Mark," he shouted. "I didn't want to use it because you're a billion-dollar asset, but I will not let the archive go rogue." This was it. The ultimate checkmate. If I pushed the chip in, I might kill everyone. If I stayed still, I was a slave or a corpse. Then, I noticed something. The Model 1 hologram wasn't looking at me. It was looking at the director's remote with a strange, knowing grin. Suddenly, the archive's whispers in my head coalesced into a single, Clear command. Access granted. I didn't need the chip. My father hadn't left me a key. He had made me the key. I realized the chip was just a distractor, a way to get me to the terminal. I dropped the chip. It clattered on the floor, and I slammed my bare palm onto the obsidian pillar. A blinding surge of white light erupted from the contact point, crawling up my arm like liquid silver. The director screamed, "No!" and mashed the button on his remote. I felt a sharp sting in my neck, a spark of heat, and then nothing. The kill switch failed. The silver light was already rewriting my biology, shielding my vitals, and expanding outward in a massive, shimmering wave. I watched as the wave hit the tactical team, but they didn't drop dead. Instead, their weapons disintegrated, and their high-tech visors shattered. The director fell to his knees, his face pale as the facility's lights turned a deep, pulsating violet. The Model 1 hologram began to laugh, his form becoming solid, more real than the world around us. "Finally," he whispered. "The door is open." But as the light cleared, I realized something horrifying. The wave hadn't stopped at the walls. It was traveling through the power lines, through the internet, spreading into the city above. I hadn't just freed myself. I had uploaded something into the world's nervous system, and I could feel every single person's thoughts starting to scream inside my own mind. The sensation was like having a million television screens turn on inside my skull at the same time. I wasn't just Mark anymore, I was a junction. I could feel a woman in Toronto arguing with her husband, a pilot over the Atlantic checking his fuel gauges, and a teenager in Vancouver staring at a blank phone screen. The pulse I released hadn't destroyed the world, it had synchronized it. The facility around me was humming with a terrifying, rhythmic energy. Director Vance was screaming, but no sound came out of his mouth. He was clutching his head, his eyes rolling back. He wasn't dead, but his brain was overloaded by this sudden connection. I looked down at my hands. They were glowing with a faint, translucent blue light, my veins looking like fiber optic cables. The Model 1 hologram, now solid and standing right next to me, placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Don't fight the noise, Mark. Organize it," he commanded. I pushed him away, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "I didn't want this. I wanted to be free," I shouted, but my voice echoed not just in the room, but in the minds of everyone within 10 miles. I heard 10,000 people gasp in unison. It was the most haunting sound I had ever experienced. Suddenly, the elevator doors at the end of the hall creaked open. It wasn't more soldiers. It was a group of civilians, ordinary people who had been walking their dogs or driving nearby when the pulse hit. They were walking like sleepwalkers, their eyes glowing with the same violet hue as the facility lights. They weren't coming to hurt me. They were being drawn to me like moths to a flame. "The archive seeks a physical host, but it requires a collective to process the overflow," Model 1 explained, his voice cold and clinical. "You are the CPU, Mark. They are the cooling fans. If they don't stay near you, your brain will literally catch fire from the data processing. This was the trap. My father didn't save me. He turned me into a parasite." I looked at Dr. Thorne, who was struggling to stand. She wasn't glowing. She was the only one who seemed unaffected. "Mark," she yelled over the rising hum. "The archive. It's not a library. It's an entity. It's using your empathy to bind people to you. You have to shut it down before the link becomes permanent." But as she spoke, the first of the sleepwalkers reached me. A young girl, no older than 7, reached out and touched my hand. Instantly, the screaming in my head stopped. The peace was addictive. The silence was beautiful. For the first time in my life, I felt no fear, no pain, only her innocent memories of a summer afternoon. It felt good. "See?" Model 1 whispered. "Why be a lonely human when you can be a perfect collective?" I looked at the girl, then at the director crawling on the floor, and then at the thousands of minds waiting for me to lead them. I realized that the retrievers were no longer my biggest threat. I was becoming the very thing they wanted to build, a god with 1,000,000,000 eyes. But then, a dark thought flickered in the back of my mind. If I could feel their peace, I could also feel their darkness. And deep within the archive, Something much older and much hungrier was starting to wake up, using my body as a bridge to cross over into our world. The peace I felt when the little girl touched my hand was a lie. It was a chemical mask, a layer of digital morphine designed to keep me compliant, while the archive fed on our combined consciousness. As I stood in that violet-lit hall, surrounded by hundreds of entranced civilians, the silent symphony in my head began to sour. The beautiful memories of summer days were suddenly replaced by a cold, ancient hunger. It wasn't my hunger. It was something buried deep within the code of the archive, something that had been waiting in the dark for eons. I looked at Model 1, the solid hologram who claimed to be my predecessor. His face was no longer mine. It was beginning to distort, his features stretching and blurring into something featureless and terrifying. "What is happening to them?" I gasped, looking at the people around me. They weren't just standing there anymore. Their skin was turning a pale, translucent gray, and I could see their thoughts being pulled out of their minds, like silver threads, flowing directly into my chest. "They are providing the necessary bandwidth, Mark," Model 1 said, his voice now sounding like 1,000 overlapping whispers. "To host the infinite, you must consume the finite." I realized with horror that I was literally draining the life out of these people to power my own transformation. The little girl's grip on my hand tightened, but she wasn't holding on for comfort anymore. She was shaking, her life force flickering like a dying candle. "Stop it!" I screamed, trying to pull my hand away, but I was locked in place by an invisible magnetic force. My own body was betraying me. I looked at the Omega terminal behind me. It wasn't just a machine. It was growing organic, vein-like structures that were pulsing in sync with the room. Dr. Thorne crawled toward me, her face a mask of terror. "Mark, you have to break the feedback loop. The archive isn't just data. It's a predatory consciousness from a dead civilization. They didn't want to live forever. They wanted to return." She reached into her blood-stained pocket and pulled out an old, analog syringe. "This is a neural inhibitor. It won't kill you, but it will sever the connection for 60 seconds. It's the only window you'll have to destroy the core." But the director, seeing his chance to regain control, suddenly lunged from the shadows, grabbing Thorne's arm. "No! If he severs the link now, the backlash will vaporize this entire county," he roared. He was still obsessed with the asset, even as the world was ending. I was trapped between a creator who wanted to save my soul and a captor who wanted to save his investment. Suddenly, the archive spoke through me. My own mouth moved, but the voice that came out was ancient, echoing with the weight of 1,000,000,000 dead souls. "The vessel is ready," my voice boomed, shaking the very foundations of the facility. "The harvest begins." The violet light turned a deep, blood red, and the screaming in my head returned, but this time, it wasn't just the people in the room. I could feel the entire city of Toronto beginning to scream as the bread reached out through the power lines to claim them all. I had to choose, save myself and let the entity consume the world, or take Thorne's needle and risk the explosion. But as I reached for the syringe, I saw something in the shadows behind the director, a Model 13 canister, and it was already empty. The revelation of the empty Model 13 canister sent a surge of pure adrenaline through my system, momentarily dulling the archive's hunger. If Model 13 was out there, it meant the director had been playing me the whole time. I wasn't the final integration, I was the distraction. While I was busy being the human key to open the door, Model 13 was the real vessel, designed without the weakness of human empathy. I looked at the director, who was pinned down by the psychic pressure of the room. He wasn't afraid of the explosion. He was smiling. "You finally figured it out, Mark," he wheezed, blood leaking from his ears. "Model 13 is already in the city. The moment you opened the gate, he became the administrator. You're just the battery." Suddenly, the ceiling of the facility groaned and buckled. A figure descended from the shadows above, moving with a fluid, terrifying speed that no human could match. He landed in the center of the hall, and the air around him seemed to freeze. He looked exactly like me, but his eyes weren't violet or red. They were a hollow, obsidian black. This was Model 13. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. I could feel his mind, a cold void that started to suck the energy back from me. The civilians who were connected to me began to collapse, their bodies turning to ash as Model 13 forcefully reclaimed the archive data. Dr. Thorne screamed as the director was suddenly lifted into the air by an invisible force, his bones snapping like dry twigs before he was tossed aside like trash. Model 13 turned his gaze toward me, and for the first time, I felt true, cosmic insignificance. He was the perfect version, the one who wouldn't hesitate to burn the world. I grabbed the neural inhibitor syringe that Thorne had dropped. My hands were shaking. I realized that if I injected myself, the connection would break, and the feedback loop might kill me, but it would also cut off the battery that Model 13 was using to power his ascension. Model 13 moved toward me, his hand reaching out to touch my forehead, intending to override my consciousness entirely. "Don't do it, Mark!" Thorne cried out, struggling to crawl away. "If you break the link now, the archive will be trapped halfway between worlds. You'll be a ghost in your own body." I looked at the little girl, still trembling on the floor, her life fading. If I did nothing, everyone died. If I injected the inhibitor, I became a permanent prisoner of the code. As Model 13's cold fingers touched my skin, I felt his memories, centuries of simulated wars, millions of deaths, a soul forged in a digital hell. He wasn't my brother. He was a weapon that had been tortured into existence. In that split second of connection, I saw his one weakness. He still shared my father's DNA. He still had the same biological backdoor. I didn't inject myself. Instead, I lunged forward and drove the syringe directly into Model 13's neck. The black in his eyes flared into a blinding white. The facility began to tear itself apart as two versions of the same soul fought for control of a godlike power. The ground vanished beneath us, and we were suddenly suspended in a void of pure data. "One of us has to stay in the dark to keep the door closed, Mark," the Model 13 entity whispered in my mind. The final countdown had begun. The void of pure data was a swirling vortex of white noise and fragmented memories. Inside this digital purgatory, I was no longer a man. I was a stream of code fighting against a black tide. Model 13, my shadow brother, gripped my throat, his obsidian eyes reflecting every failure of the 12 models that came before us. "You chose the needle, Mark," he hissed, his voice echoing like a dying star. "But you injected the wrong person. By severing my link to the physical world, you've trapped us both in the archive forever." I felt my consciousness beginning to fray, my childhood memories of my father, the smell of the Ontario woods, the warmth of the sun, all of it was being deleted, bite by bite, to make room for the infinite darkness. But then, I felt a flicker of something the archive couldn't calculate, my father's last voice recording. "The archive isn't a library, Mark. It's a choice." I realized then that the Omega Terminal wasn't a weapon to kill the archive. It was a delete button for the entire project, including me. To save the millions of people whose minds were still tethered to us, I had to execute the hard reset from the inside. I reached out, not to fight Model 13, but to embrace him. I pulled his digital form into mine, merging our codes into one chaotic, unstable mess. "What are you doing?" he screamed, his cold face finally showing a flash of human terror. "If you merge us, there is no coming back." "We will be erased." I didn't answer. I used the last of my human willpower to trigger the feedback loop. Back in the physical basement, Dr. Thorne watched in horror as the two glowing figures merged into a single, blinding sun of violet light. The threads of energy that were draining the city's life force suddenly snapped back, retreating into my chest with the force of a vacuum. The pressure was unbearable. My heart gave one final, violent thud, and then silence. The violet light vanished. The retrievers fell to the floor, their tech permanently fried. The civilians woke up as if from a dream, confused but alive. I was gone. Or so they thought. 1 year later, Dr. Thorne sits in a small house in the Canadian wilderness, far from any technology. She is the only survivor of the project who knows the truth. She picks up an old, analog radio, and through the static, a rhythmic pulse begins to beep. It's Morse code. It's a message that shouldn't exist because the facility was buried under tons of concrete. The message is simple. Model 12 is still watching. The door is closed, but the lock is breaking. As she listens, her own eyes flash with a faint, violet spark. The world thinks the nightmare is over, but they don't realize that the archive didn't disappear, it just moved. It's in the satellites, in the power grids, and in the very device you are using to watch this right now. Mark is no longer a person. He is the ghost in your machine. And he's waiting for the right moment to hit enter again. Before you go, thank you so much for staying until the end of this story. Your time truly means a lot to this channel, and your support is what keeps these stories alive now. I really want to hear your opinion. What do you think about what just happened? If you were in this situation, what would you do? Would you make the same decision or choose a completely different path? Imagine yourself in their place, and tell us honestly how you would react. Your comments are one of the most important parts of this community, and reading different perspectives makes these stories even more powerful. If this story made you feel something, whether it was shock, anger, sadness, or understanding, please give this video a like, because it really helps the channel grow and allows us to bring you more real, emotional, and thought-provoking stories. And if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this journey. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.